All right, so hello everyone. I guess we'll get going here. Thank you for joining the ISP Virtual Summit powered by Preseem. This session is all about best practices for success. My name is Gerrit Nagelhout. I'm the CEO of Preseem, and I'll be moderating the session today. We've got two great speakers, Abbi Hubler and Matt Larsen. I'll let them introduce themselves a little bit more in a little bit, but they're each going to give their perspective and a bunch of talking points on this, and we'll take questions at the end. If you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A tab, and then we'll start going through those at the end of this presentation. All right, Abbi, over to you.
Thank you, Gerrit. Hi, everyone. My name is Abbi Hubler. I currently serve as the COO at TekWav. We're a WISP out in Grayson County, Texas, near Lake Texoma. I have been in this industry and in IT in general for the past 10 years. I've served in a variety of different roles, whether that's customer service, marketing, sales, even head of HR at certain times. I like to specialize in operational efficiency and effectiveness, as well as leadership. So when I was presented with the opportunity to speak on this panel today, I found that the topic of best practices was quite large and a little bit general. So I felt that during my time, I wanted to focus on 4 key areas. And these are areas that are near and dear to my heart. I would like to hope that I can provide you the opportunity to look at some different areas within your company, find some opportunities to, say, tweak your current operations or add in new initiatives so that you as well can make your company as efficient and effective as possible ultimately. So let's just jump right into marketing. So when we think about marketing, there's a variety of tactics that you can deploy in your company. It really depends on what you're good at, what you like to do, and also depending on who is running marketing, the method that's being used might change. So if you have someone who's a little bit younger in their career or younger professionally, social media seems to be the hot thing to jump on. Now, regardless of the tactics that you use, you really want them to target your community as well as your prospective customers. You don't want to just throw a message out there and hope that it sticks. Now, you don't need to deploy all the different methods that I've listed on this slide in order to be successful. Again, it's really based off of your targeted audience as well as the resources that you have available. Now, when you're trying to implement different marketing tactics, it can take up to 6 months before something really becomes fruitful. So at times it can feel like you're throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping that it sticks, but don't give up. Make sure that as you're deploying these different methods, you're trying to give yourself just enough time to see what's fruitful and what's worth your time and your money versus what might not be as successful based off of your, again, targeted audience and your community. Now,
so Abbi, if I may, so this is near and dear to my heart as well. So 6 months, how do you know 3 months in, like, should you be seeing some success, or is it really like nothing until 6 months is in? Like, how do you sort of know where to keep going or not?
So I like to think of the 6-month mark as when you see the needle movers really react, as opposed to just seeing little ticks here and there. So for example, digital ads is something that I recently implemented in TekWav, and we started doing it predominantly in November. Okay, well, we're sitting here, almost mid-February now, and I'm now seeing the needle movers start to adjust. And by that, I'm looking at the number of leads that are coming in, not just the interactions or the engagement, but we've had an influx of leads coming in to the point where we can confidently receive at minimum 50 leads each month, which is significantly more before we were actually utilizing this specific tactic. So I think when you're looking at these different methods, set a goal in place. So when I started using digital ads, my only focus was leads. I need more leads in the pipe. I don't care about getting more customers right now with this tactic. I just want more people engaging with me and then signing up. So when you're thinking about these different tactics, associate it with a goal. For example, if you do flyers, do you want more calls to come in? And now we're gauging call volume over the course of, say, 3 to 6 months to see, did it in fact bring in more customers or more calls, or does it feel about the same? And you don't have to give up on the tactic if it's not really moving.
Are you able to see from the different tactics you're utilizing to see which ones are working? Like when you get a bunch of leads to your website, can you tell, that was a door tag, that was a digital ad we did or something like that?
To a degree, we can. So what we have set up in our form that people fill out is they have to answer the question of how did you hear about us? So we can usually identify, did they see us on Facebook first and then go to our website? Did they see a door tag or a yard sign? We also try to ask if that lead actually comes in over a phone call or as we're going through the onboarding process, how did you hear about us? And usually by then, that person can confidently say, oh yeah, I saw that post on Facebook, but I went to your website because I looked further. Or I saw your truck driving past my street when my neighbor got installed. And unless you really have some sort of systematic way of tracking it, you might just have to track it manually of, hey, in a custom field within your billing system or your CRM, I'm going to track which method that person selects, and I'm going to run a report off of that. So it gives you some opportunity to look. Yeah. So I don't know about you, Gerrit, but I think everybody kind of chooses their own methods. So both of us, we like the digital ads. I hate to admit this, but I like door tagging. I used to be really against door tagging, but it does work. And then I'd say the other top two would be vehicle branding as well as flyering. Those would be my top four if you have to start somewhere. I would not start, honestly, just with swag or only with social media. I would play with those other four as well.
Yeah, interesting.
So something else to keep in mind. So I threw out the 6-month thing. So another thing to keep in mind with marketing is it can take up to 7 touches before somebody actually decides to make a move. And that move could be filling out a form and actually signing up. So what I mean by 7 touches is that pertains to 7 different opportunities that person learned about you. So it could be a flyer, it could be a mailer, it could be a vehicle driving past, it could be a boosted post on Facebook or a digital ad. It could even be that they Googled internet service and your company's name popped right up. It could be word of mouth. And not everybody needs 7 touches in order to get to that point, but most need more than one interaction to actually want to dive in a little bit deeper. I mean, think about your own buying process. You don't just go to a lot and buy a car, right? You research it, you see what would work best for you, and you determine, where do I want to buy that vehicle? And that might change. Family situation might change, living situation might change, and now you're looking at a different car in this example.
Yeah. Do you think about the buyer journey at all? Because it sort of fits into that as well, right? Like, we often think about the selling side, but consumers at the other end of this, right? They have a sort of a different path in mind.
Oh, you absolutely need to think about the buyer journey. And I'd say between marketing and sales, that journey needs to really be considered. From the marketing side, it's how do we put our best foot forward? You know, what are we talking about? So that prospective buyer is looking at the company going, oh, that looks like an interesting company. I want to look more into them. Or they look reputable. They look like they know what they're doing. And when we set that stage as almost like an expectation, when they come on board and you've got a killer sales crew who goes in and answers all their questions, seem very knowledgeable, are consistent in follow-up, and then they sign up for service, and your scheduling team does the exact same thing, and your field guys do the same thing, and you're keeping that consistency, you are now not only meeting your expectation, but you're also showing the customer, we care. You're not just a number to us. You are a customer that we not only want to sign up, but we want to retain for the long term, because you're more than just revenue to us. And I'll talk about branding in a bit, because I feel like branding can come into this because you're talking about who you are as a company. But when you're looking at how you market yourself, messaging is really important here. So who are you as a company? What do you make? What are your products and services? And why should I buy them? Why should I switch from a big name ISP to one that's local in my community? What's the benefit besides helping out the little guy? And you want to express that to your customers, because we all can't compete on speed or pricing, but we can compete on quality and customer service. We can compete on knowledge as well. So there's different things to include when you're talking. And then one other thing I'm going to throw out with messaging that I've seen significantly help bring in leads is promotions. If you can do a promotion each month, you're giving your customers something to brag about to other people who want to sign up, but you're also giving new customers the opportunity to step in when it works for them. So for example, in February, TekWave's doing a promotion for referrals. I need more referrals. I want my customers to go tell their friends and family to sign up for TekWav. So I'll tell you what, I'll give my referrer $25 credit on their next bill, and I'll give my referee $50 off their install cost. I made my existing customer happy. And I got a new customer that got half off their activation fee. They're signed up, they're good to go. And now they're relying on their friend to really say, hey, you said this is an awesome company. I'm going to sign up and take a shot. And so far, it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you. So I mentioned branding, and I know branding can seem like something to be pushed off if you're not in marketing. It seems like colors and fonts and logos and just frou-frou. I mean, I've had plenty of conversations with my CEO about how much I love branding and how much he does not like branding. So really what branding is, just for those who are not as familiar, is it's a way to distinguish your company. It's almost like adding a personality to your company so people know who you are. And it's more than just having your logo. When you are developing your brand, it's helpful to be consistent with it. So having a brand guide is extremely helpful. Even if it's like a one-pager that just says, here is the font that we're using, the color choice, here is our logo, and here's the way that we are going to communicate with people. Say word choices or taglines or that type of thing. Excuse me. But really, the more that you can utilize a brand guide, the more consistent you can be with the way that you present yourself to the public, whether that is prospective customers or existing customers. Now, I've outlined 6 key elements that are associated with brand. And for you, those of you who might just be starting off, it seems like a lot to jump into. I would say the top 3 would be your identity, your promise, and targeting. Now, we already kind of talked about identity. It's basically how you visually represent yourself. So it's easy to pull from your website or social media or flyers, that type of thing. Now, the promise is a little bit different because that focuses on, why you're in business and what you hope to achieve. And later on in this session, I do want to talk about how to develop your mission and vision statements and what that looks like for customer expectations. But that promise helps your company to feel more real and like you are more than just a startup that's just trying to get customers. It shows that you've given your company some consideration as to where you want to get to, what your goals are. And then with targeting, that's who do you want to sell to? Who's that ideal customer? Because not every person who signs up is your ideal customer. So by thinking about, what type of demographic you'd like to have, whether that is, I want the single family home user who predominantly streams and works from home, or I want the MDU person. I want the tenant who is barely home, but when they're home, they're gaming and they're streaming and they're going to use their service after hours. Or I want the business that has under 50 employees that needs a backup connection. And thinking about who that audience is so that when you start to adjust your branding, you're speaking to those people and in a way you're speaking their language.
Yeah. Does it go much further than that? Like you talked about, obviously commercial, MDU, residential, and all that, right? But on the residential side, would you ever say, yep, you have a home, you're in line of sight, we can target you, but you're not my customer? Or is it, that's, or they generally would be?
I would not say no to getting a customer if they're sitting there ready and willing. But what I'm talking about more so is how you're communicating with the prospective leads. So you might have people trickle in that are the minority that you're not really targeting. So say, for example, you're targeting families predominantly. You want to get families that want larger speed packages because you're really trying to sell those speed packages. And then you get the single person who lives by themselves who maybe needs 25 megs down, maybe. I'm going to sign them up for sure. Absolutely. But what I would then ask them when I'm going through that process with them on the sales side is, how did you hear about us? Was it an ad? Was it our Facebook? Was it our website? So then I can determine, oh, that speaks to them too. Could they then be one of my new ideal customers? And your ideal customer can change based off of the services that you provide and even the time of year. It just kind of depends on what your goals are, again, for your marketing team and what you're really trying to achieve through these efforts.
do you find your goals change over time as new technology comes out as well? Like, does it evolve a lot, or is it, yep, faster speeds, new equipment, but it's still the same thing?
So I'd say it does change. And we're going through a perfect example right now at TekWav. So Tirana is hot. For those of you who are not using Tirana, it is insane, like absolutely insane. And we have 3 towers right now that are lit up with it. And something that needs to happen on the marketing side is to justify the cost of the Tirana. So we need customers on that. So as head of marketing, my job is to determine where around that Tirana tower could I get service. And now I will need to then say, post ads to get people on board. Am I going to do a promotion for them? Will I have certain packages available just for that tower? I also need to consider, how am I going to even get the message out? So I need to start thinking about yard signing and door tagging, digital ads targeted specifically in their little zip codes. So yes, it does change, but I would say as a member of marketing, it's really important for you to understand the needs of your network too, because if the capacity isn't there, then why am I signing up more customers or trying to get customers on a specific tower if they're not going to have a good experience?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of want to switch gears here. So marketing is different than sales, but sales is just as important as marketing because it gets the customers to actually sign up and we get conversion. Now, I wanted to take a moment to focus on a sales funnel. And the image that I have on this slide is a little bit of an adapted version of one that I'm using in TekWav right now. And really what it is it serves as a way to visualize the different steps a prospective lead goes through between first kind of getting interested in our service and then actually getting installed and becoming an active billable customer. So your flow might be a little bit different and you might add more steps or remove steps. It just kind of depends on what you find to be the most successful. But I've found breaking it down in this way is usually easy to understand. Now, this goes back to that customer journey. You know, what process do they go through between saying, hey, I'm kind of interested in TekWav and I'm an active customer of TekWav. I got signed up. I'm happy. Let's go. In order to get people to get to that point, you need to understand the phases they're going to go through. So initially, we're going to need their information just so that I have a way to contact them. I know where they're located and I have a name to call them by. From there, I need to qualify them. You know, Tirana is awesome. It's easier to qualify, but if you're still using, say, Ubiquiti equipment, Cambium, and other wireless technology, you still are depending on line of sight. How good is that connection between that customer, the potential customer, and one of your towers? And before I go in and use up their time, I really need to make sure that they have enough of a signal quality just remotely before I send a technician on site. So we need to qualify that. And then as soon as we can, we need to schedule it and get a technician on site so that we can install our equipment. Now, you might need to follow up with leads multiple times. It just happens. Not everybody is saying, hey, I want service, and they sign up and they go through the whole process in one fell swoop. It could take a couple of days. It could take different forms of contact. You're going to have to play with that and determine what's best based off of that person. But the more mediums you have for contact, the easier it is because then you can switch from, say, a phone call to a text message. Now, when you're contacting the customer, I think something that can be easily forgotten in sales is this is an opportunity to receive feedback on what do people think of your product before they even sign up. I want people to tell me it's too expensive. I can get a faster speed somewhere else. I want them to even tell me if the install rate is too high, because then I can then take that feedback and go, is it? Do I agree with that? Do we need to have a certain promotion? Can I target this person later if I have half off the install fee? Are they right that, our speeds are not even compatible or comparable with the other providers out there in our area? And taking that back can give you the opportunity to chat with marketing, even chat with leadership and go, is there something else we can do and plan for? We got that exact feedback with our speeds. And as of January 2nd, all of our speeds have doubled, if not tripled, but all of our pricing has stayed the same because people gave us that feedback and we took it to heart. I'd say one more thing to think about with this sales funnel is not everybody is going to be installed. Some will have to be waitlisted. The power of the waitlist is so important because it gives you the opportunity to follow up with people later on when your services improve or say your coverage expands. Keep those people at your disposal because then you can leverage those leads in the future and say, hey, guess what? I'm running a promotion. I can get you now, or I just installed a tower and now I can be your service provider. And now you've got somebody who is so excited because you followed through and can now be an advocate for you and refer other customers to you in the future.
Yeah, interesting. The speed package increase you mentioned, with all the data we have at Preseem, we see that as well. Like if you already get 20, 50 megabits, adding more speed doesn't take that much more bandwidth usually. It's more of a marketing thing in many cases. So you can run experiments as well, even ahead of time, and see what the impact is going to be. Anyways, different conversation.
You absolutely can. We did just that. We upgraded everybody's speeds by 50% without them knowing. And we noticed that the actual usage on our network didn't change because giving them more speed doesn't equal them using it more. They're not going to magically go out and just buy all these devices and use them.
Yeah, we have all kinds of data now on fixed wireless support as well that sort of digs into that. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So we've kind of talked about like lead funneling. We've talked about how to talk to them. Now there's the actual conversion element. That's something to take very seriously. And some of what's listed on this slide, we've already touched on before. I'd say the number one thing that you need to consider is the way that you actually manage your leads. We had a night and day difference in the way that we manage sales the moment that we implemented a CRM, as opposed to utilizing just our billing software. So whether you're using Sonar, PowerCode, or one of the other vendors on the market, they're usually based more so on your existing customer. They've been signed up, they're going, and you're managing the rest of the journey. But managing the journey before they sign up, sometimes you feel like it's just not enough. We have a variety of different vendors within our industry that you can go to and talk to about what systems to use. I personally use a system called High Level. It is phenomenal. I can manage the entire process. I can contact people. It has saved me so much time. And just in a quick glance, I know how many leads are currently in my funnel without having to go dig and sort by like account status. So if you're going to take anything away from this slide, please get yourself a CRM. It will save you so much headache and time. Believe you me, I am so thankful that I have access to it. Okay. So something near and dear to both Gerrit and my hearts is definitely customer success. Don't even get me started. I could talk for hours on customer success, but really your customer success team are your advocates and your customer retainers. They're why you keep your customer base. They're the ones making sure that your customers are happy and flourishing. Sometimes they have to make sure they pay their bills. So this team is very important within your company. The one thing that I learned recently about customer success that I just didn't take to heart until more recently was you can't have them do everything. If you have them do everything, they're looking all over the place. There's no true focus, and it's pretty easy to have balls be dropped. We decided within the last few months to remove sales from our CS team. And that has helped us to finally be able to follow up with leads in such a efficient way. So if you currently have sales being ran by your customer success team, I recommend considering whether or not that's in your best interest. If you have someone who can be dedicated towards sales, do it, because they have a whole different skill set. They are going to be the ones who can like hit the quotas, get the leads in, get them scheduled, as opposed to the people who just want to nurture and make sure that your customers are happy and thriving. So anything about CS I want you to take is pull sales from it.
Yeah, I'll try and keep this brief, Abby. I know we only have so much time here, but yeah, customer success is something we started doing a lot more of fairly recently as well. And one of the big things I've learned is a feedback loop, right? So talking to your customers, how are they using the product? What do they like? What do they don't like? And then feeding that back into right to the beginning, the marketing team and even the engineering team. Now, being B2B, we can afford to do that. We can afford to spend time having these conversations. Do you find to go to that degree with your residential customers as well, or is it more like survey based or things like that?
I don't think we have the resources to be able to, per customer, to ask them how they're doing. We try to implement a follow-up system. So we call it 2 by 2 by 2. So we check in 2 days after they've had a service call or an installation appointment. We'll check in 2 weeks later and then 2 months later. And it usually gives us the opportunity to identify if there's any issues. So if the customer's having a speed issue, or they feel like their payments are too much, or say they just have some general feedback, that's usually our opportunity to grab it. I mean, candidly, with our Texas customers, they will not, keep their comments to themselves. They will give you that feedback. And I've had to learn the power of that feedback and thanking them for it, even if it's a weakness. And you're like, yes, I know that sucks. It's not fun, but thank you for telling me that it's impacting you, and take it to heart. Think about it. We had feedback recently about the way that we handled our customer service after hours versus business hours. We made adjustments. I haven't heard a word about it since. So if you can make those adjustments and hear your customers and see how it actually applies to your company, chances are it will improve and they'll be happier.
Interesting. I'll just one of the questions from the audience here I'll just bring up because it's very relevant to this slide. You talked about having a different sort of CRM for top of the funnel leads as from your actual billing system for existing customers, right? And the question is there anything that connects those together, like in terms of automate, right? So they go from a lead in this system and then eventually they make their way into Sonar or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, so I'm in the exact same position that this questionnaire is asking. I'm actually in the process of working with my CRM to build an integration into our billing system, which is the one they indicated. I would say if you can look at Zapier and you can work with your CRM company, chances are they're willing to make an integration. The company that I use also is within our WISP space. You can go to different marketers within our WISP space. I use Leverage Social personally. They are fabulous. And they are hearing us and saying, hey, we need an integration. So they're hoping within the next, I would say, 2 months tops, that when a new lead comes into our CRM, it also goes into Sonar in my case, and then updates it as it moves along. So updates statuses, updates notes, so that you don't have to update 2 platforms. You can just update one.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move forward with a topic that I feel like I've spent a lot of time discussing with different business owners and different WISPs, and it's easily neglected. We get so busy with everything going on running our networks that honestly building this foundation can just be put on the back burner. Now, establishing your mission and your vision basically give you the opportunity to say, why am I in business and what do I want to do? Think about it. Your mission needs to be something that your employees can look to. It's almost like a guiding light to a degree of why they join the company. And your vision helps you actually get there. So for example, at TekWav, when I came in, we really tried to identify our mission. And our mission is to provide connectivity to those that are unserved and underserved through being advocates for them and also innovating for them. And that's exactly what we do. That drives all of our different initiatives. It drives all of our goals as well, is that we want to serve the underserved and unserved. Think about what that means for your company and write it down and share it with your employees. Also, share your policies with your employees, the regulations, the rules, expectations. Your handbook is going to CYA you up. If you do not have one, go start writing one. If you need help, I'm happy to help out, and you have a variety of different HR leads within our industry that would be happy to step in and tell you what you need. The one thing to remember, though, is there are certain regulations per state, as well as federally based off your company size. So do some research to make sure that you are including what you absolutely need to, and you can remove the things that don't apply to you just yet. Another area I want to talk about is core values and culture. So core values and culture are not one-to-one. They play into each other, but they're not the same thing. Your core values is basically who you are and how you're going to act. What do you represent? I was talking with Matt before our session, and we talked about the power of core values. What do you represent? One of TekWav's, for example, is we are human. We make mistakes. Own it. It's okay. We'll fix it. And because we have that core value, you can see it in every single meeting, every single interaction, internally and externally. We own our mistakes and we keep trying to be resilient. Now that core value then goes into your culture, because that's how you actually act. Think about how you act in a community, how you interact with each other. Do you say happy birthday to everybody who it's their birthday? Do you say, happy holidays to them? Do you celebrate the wins? Do you do anything fun? Do you have like times to get together? That culture is really what drives your employees to continue to want to show up and be a part of this beyond just the role that they play within the company. Your core values should not change. They should stay the same, but your culture is going to change as you add different people to that community and as time changes in your company scales. So keep that in mind, that core values will only really change if big like business events happen, merger, acquisition, that type of thing. Last thing to throw in about your business foundation is document. You need your policies and processes and procedures all documented. Think of it like playing a game. You first pull out the rules that you know how to win. If you don't read the rules, it's based off of luck if you win. So make sure that your team is set up for success by providing them clear direction in the form of documentation that they can easily access and refer back to when they have questions.
Yeah. Question, Abby. So I like all of those. They make sense, and it's something that's big for us at Preseem as well. Are you following a particular framework like EOS traction, or have you like pick different best pieces from different areas? Like how did this come to be?
Oh, great question. Traction, all the way traction. So when I first started, we focused on the people side of traction, which I'll move over to this slide just because I'll probably chat about it. But because of traction, we really instilled that concept of right person, right seat. And that started to help us develop our core values, our culture, our mission statement, our vision statement, and everything just fell into place. Now we're in the process of really implementing level 10 meetings, developing our rocks. And I'll tell you, night and day difference. Because we worked so hard on trying to implement little pieces of traction over the course of like the last year, our team hasn't felt this drastic shift. Instead, it's a refreshing moment that they sit there and they feel like their concerns have been heard. We can keep moving forward. And they feel like we're actually moving into a company that isn't just in startup mode, but we're trying to get out of that. Yeah. So definitely recommend that.
Did you bring in a consultant to do it, or did you try and do it yourself?
So we tried to do it in-house ourselves. We do have a business consultant. He isn't a part of Traction. He's not affiliated with that system, but he's also very familiar with it. And he helped to mediate all the different meetings that we had and set us up for success on it. So I know I'm about to end my time, and then I'll be passing it over to Matt pretty soon. When it comes to people, what you need to consider is that journey as well. The customer journey is just as important as your people journey. So what are your employees going through when they first start, when they're hired, when they're onboarding and they're training? And then once they're in the role, how do you set them up for success? How do you set expectations for them to then hold them accountable, as well as step in and discipline when needed? So making sure that you have your people management down is extremely important, because people are your resource. And if that resource isn't taken care of appropriately, you're not going to have the people anymore. So I think, Gerrit, that was my last slide. So I think on to Matt's section. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much, Abby. Matt, over to you.
Well, I just want to say, Abby, that's a fantastic description. Obviously, JJ made an awesome hire getting you on board, because you pretty much nailed a lot of the elements that are really important. So thanks for bringing those up. So I'm Matt Larsen. I run an operation called Vistabeam. We've been in service since 2004. I've been in the wireless ISP business since '98, and I've made about all the mistakes that you can make. So hopefully I can share a little bit of the stuff that seems to be working for me with you guys, so we can work through. I'll share my mistakes from best practices to try and help get you in the right direction with your operation. So just some of the highlights here. We'll go over number one, being proactive with your network management system. And there's a big role that Preseem plays with that for us. Getting control of inventory, scheduling, processes and standardization, and documentation. Those are two things that Abby referred to that Those can get really deep. And then the last thing is dashboards and KPIs to kind of track your progress and make sure that you pick the right things to watch. There's a great saying, what get measured is what gets watched. So that's why it's really important to kind of come up with the stuff that's going to make sense to track, and don't get distracted by the wrong kind of metrics. So go ahead and start running through
people
these.
will try and make them better, even if they aren't the right one.
Yeah. I'll bring up a couple examples later on, but it can get a little scary when you pick the wrong metrics and people start to optimize for the wrong stuff. So save that for later. Anyway, first thing is kind of having proactive network management. The bigger you get, the more things will go wrong, the more complicated things can get. When you start out and you just have a few towers, it's easier to keep track of things. And we've seen our network grow exponentially. When I started this network in 2004, we had 3 towers, and now we have over 300 infrastructure points that we have to keep track of. And it's too much to try and watch everything yourself. So you really need to get network management system that can let you know when things are wrong before customers call. And it's really important to get something that kind of lets you know before you have a problem. And that's one of the things where we really get a lot of benefit out of Preseem. We're using the new features that do business scoring and shows capacity on an access point. So that's one of the things that we've gotten a lot more proactive about, is watching how much actual capacity is out there and making sure that we don't oversell capacity on a particular access point. And also look for situations where backhaul might be starting to reach a threshold where it's getting overloaded. Being able to set up alerts like that, just invaluable, because at a certain point, you just can't keep track of it yourself. You still need to have people watching for there's still helps a lot to have a human eye keeping track of things, but it really helps that human eye when you've got some automated tools to kind of help direct everything back to the right point. Second thing, redundancy is key. So with the way our network is set up from the start, we always try to have 2 different backhaul points into any particular location. And one of the things that did is it enabled us to build a much more resilient network. So you didn't have a situation where, for example, one tower that's got 4 or 5 other towers feeding off of it. If that tower goes down, then you've got 5 towers down. So we always try to have some kind of a backup connection coming into an area. And that has been really a big key to try and make sure that we can keep service going and get a little bit of time to come out and do a repair. I can tell you that for the last 3 months, the majority of the emergency service calls we've had to do have been on the few places where we don't have a backup route. And it's just really important to try and build that in, even if it's a lower capacity backhaul, as long as you've got something in there to keep customers online, it just helps a ton. And then the other thing is to standardize your processes as much as possible, and then revise those processes as necessary. And we're in the midst of going through a massive revision of a lot of our network right now. We're changing from a very OSPF centric, every backhaul, every AP has its own port type of a deal, to more of a switch based setup. And it's a lot to chew on with the size of a network that we've got. But we basically have a standardized process. Every time we go through a router, there's a checklist that has to be followed, and everything has to be done in a similar manner, all the way down to like naming conventions on interfaces and stuff like that, and making sure that the configurations are consistent across the board, running the same type of firmware, using the same type of configs everywhere. It's really important to do that if you want to be able to have a network that you can easily troubleshoot and go back and change, because at this point we have multiple people working on different segments of the network. And if they aren't following the same playbook, it gets really confusing. And we recently did an acquisition of another operation that had multiple people kind of changing the way they did things over a period of several years, and it just turned into chaos. And it's really important to kind of maintain that discipline, maintain that standardization, or else things can get out of control really quickly. Mm-hmm. Next one, inventory control is pretty straightforward. Inventory is kind of a tough one for a lot of WISPs. There's not really, I haven't really come across good tools for working with it that were not terribly expensive. I'm embarrassed to say we actually have Excel spreadsheets that we use to track a lot of it, but at least that's something that we go in and make the revisions to it and track it. But we do have people that keep a pretty close eye on what we have on the shelves. It's really important to have spares. There is nothing worse than having a major outage because a piece of equipment got damaged or failed, and you don't have a spare piece to put up in place of it. So you want to have something good out there. You want to have enough spares to replace just about anything on your network. And that kind of goes hand in hand with redundancy to keep customers going. The other thing is to kind of work on forecasting. Once you've got an established business, you should be able to kind of come up with an idea of how much of any particular type of item you're going to need during a month, and kind of putting in regular orders. We found a couple of distributors are really good to work with. If we give them a forecast of what we think we're going to need, that helps us get stuff on time. And that's good for the distributors too, to have an idea of what your demand looks like. So it will also help you get better prices if you can kind of commit to that. So forecasting what you think you're going to need is very important. And don't forget that one-off projects, that can get really frustrating. So it kind of comes back to standardization. Now, we've tried and have a lot of different types of equipment in our network. Every once in a while, we will try something one-off just as more of an experiment than anything else to see if it's something that we want to do. But just remember that comes, even if somebody sends you some equipment to try out, it actually turns out the cost of the labor and the cost of the time to try and implement that is actually fairly expensive. So make sure that if you're going to commit to doing something like that, that it's going to make sense. For example, several years ago, Gerrit had to talk me into trying Preseem stuff out. I was kind of, I wasn't exactly a believer up front when they talked to me
about
at
first.
But he convinced me, and I would say that that's about the best money we spend on a monthly basis is on that product. So there, it was definitely worth it to try a one-off and see how it would work. But we kind of kept it contained and came up with a good test package for it. Works out very well. So just one thing to keep in mind, do experiment when it makes sense, but don't go too crazy with it.
Yeah, or maybe if the experiment is good, roll it out widely, and if it isn't, get rid of it again, right? So you don't end up with a lot of one-off warts over time. Yep.
So scheduling is a really interesting one. So we still use basically Google Calendars. We have a fairly well-developed ticketing system. And at one point, I told my guys, I said, I think we need a dispatcher. And I actually got a little bit of pushback because some of my guys were like, man, we're really efficient with how we do the work. And on the back end, on the work, on the guys going out in the field, I think they actually did a pretty good job. But the problem was we had salespeople that started filling slots with very little regard for geographic considerations. So we'd have people that their morning install would be, 60 miles from their home base, and then they'd have to turn around and drive 100 miles to their afternoon install. We cover a big territory. So it's really important to kind of apply some intelligence to that. So we ended up hiring a dispatcher, and the improvement in efficiency and the quality of the work that we were able to do just shot up like crazy. And so there are automated systems out there that will try and do that, but I don't think there's really a good substitute for having a good human with good knowledge of geography and the people that they're working with, and able to, have a good relationship with customers as well, to go out and get people lined up, get your field people lined up to get to the places where they need to be efficiently. Routing's
Do you
huge.
find, sorry, do you find you're able to mix sort of new installs and truck rolls and fixes for existing ones, or are they kind of separate from each other?
So one of the things we do, I had a deal that I used to do to the field guys, and it was kind of the hey, while you're there, why don't you do this? And it was early on, it was because I would know of stuff that kind of, hey, while you're there, why don't you do this, without enough consideration for the time that it actually took to do some of that. Every once in a while, we could squeeze in a while you're there. But one of the things that's happened is we've got at the point now where we started tagging all of our tickets with either a tower or a geographic region. So if we send somebody into a region and they may have one install, but it's going to take them a couple hours to drive there, then we do look through there. It's like, do we have any other tickets in that area that need to be done? And now we're able to start kind of doing some proactive things. For example, like with the Preseem, it gives us the ability to really proactively seek out customers who may have a low signal strength or low modulation, and they have a low business score. They're not necessarily out of service, but we're now proactively looking for those customers to go out and say, hey, can we move this customer to a different access point? Do we need to upgrade an antenna there or something? And so if we go to do an install and we've got a couple other tickets that we could do improvements, then we line it up to do that at the same time while we have somebody in the area. So that's part of the process of kind of being more efficient, figuring out ways to reduce time in a vehicle. Like I said, every minute that you're driving and not working is not productive. Unfortunately, we do a ton of driving where I'm at. We cover a huge geographic area, and just have to do a lot of that. So that makes a big difference to us. But it's really important to have somebody that knows what they're doing, and people that are good at dispatch they're worth their weight in gold. So once you get over a certain point and a certain geographic size, you should really consider getting a dispatch person that can stay on top of that. Next thing, processes and standardization. I started to make a little bit of a reference to how important it is to have standardized processes. And if you're going to scale up, you can't do it without standardizing. So one of the things that, it's not very hard for a person to make a better hamburger than McDonald's does. But McDonald's is the best at making millions and billions of consistent hamburgers and marketing them and making sure that the quality, low as it may be, is at least standardized across an entire global platform. And that took a lot of standardization and making sure that there was good quality control in there. So if you want to scale your operation up, you really need to keep standard processes and make sure you've got some quality control. And some people push back. I used to get that. And this was especially from people that maybe were new to the company or came to the company, had previous experience. Every once in a while, we get somebody, oh, that's not the way we did it. It makes more sense to do it this way. Well, if somebody brought something that really seemed like it made sense, we would go ahead and implement that as part of our standard. But it's not the sort of thing that encourages it. It's not causing people to not be creative. It really gives us the ability to focus on the right things and enable it so that our back end people can provide support for the guys that are out in the field or for any of the operations we're trying to do. And then it's important to enforce it. So we do quality checks on our field guys and our contractors. We perform regular audits of the data that we collect, and then we do annual reviews with our field guys and our subcontractors to do work for us, and we kind of go through and highlight where they're doing good or where they're not. This audit process has turned out to be very important. So we have like multiple things we collect. I think we have like 8 pictures that an installer has to get when they go do a service call. And those are things we can go back and look at. If somebody says, well, the signal's down on this customer, we can go back and look, oh, they didn't go to the high point of the roof and there's a tree growing in the way, that sort of thing. So we can kind of go back and judge that. And it's great to use with contractors. Probably about half the installs and service calls that we do are performed by contractors, and we use that to audit their work. So if they don't pass audit, they don't get paid. Well, that makes them do a lot better job on that. So I think that's really important. If you're going to get to any kind of size at all, it's really important to have that standardization out there. And of course, with standardization, document everything. One of the things that's really difficult with this business is, and I don't know if it's necessarily as prevalent now with the younger generation. It's a lot more used to interacting online. But I know a lot of people from my generation and earlier were not very good about sharing knowledge. And you kind of ended up with having these knowledge bottlenecks of where there's one guy in the company that can fix this problem. And they kind of hold that data hostage to kind of guarantee job security. And that's something we've kind of gotten around that by making people put processes together. So it's really important to document everything. And as long as the documentation is there, it also enables your employees to be a lot more self-directed. They can go in and explore and look through, and like if there's a question, they don't have to pester another person or try and get somebody else to do it for them. Nobody has an excuse, and nobody showed me that. It's like, well, it's in the documentation. You have access to it. You can look at it. This is the way you're supposed to do things. So it's really important to make sure that all your processes get documented, and they need to revisions whenever you make changes on things, but it's super important. One of the best things we've done over the last 3-4 years is we developed our own intranet, and that has been extremely valuable. It has all of our documentation in it. It has links to all of our systems, and it's like it's the blueprint. Here's how to do everything, and it's right there. It's accessible. The issue we had in the past is people would develop. We used to have all these really cool tools, but they wouldn't be communicated out to everybody that would potentially use them. And having the intranet is that one place where you can put everything in there and make sure that everybody has a path to access that information. It takes a lot of work to get it done, but if you're going to scale up, it's a necessity. When we started out, I think we had 4 employees, and now we're coming up on 50. And we're able to do that because we have that documentation out there and accessible to everybody. The other thing is, if you don't have a ticket system, make sure to get one established to go back and keep track of like what happens with customers. That is super important to go back and look at the history of what happened with a customer to see what steps were done to try and take care of a problem, what worked, what didn't. That sort of thing. And it also enforces accountability. Plus, the ticketing system can be used as a data source for employee reviews at some point in the future to go back and look at the quality of work somebody did. That's usually reflected in the ticket system. So that's important. Some of the tools you can use, like I said, an intranet is super important. If you don't feel like you've got the time or the personnel to develop an intranet, just coming up with a simple wiki is a great way to start. And most people can figure out how to put stuff into a wiki. So that is something to start with. That's pretty easy. Another thing is a centralized calendar that everybody's working off of to make sure you can see when somebody's going to be gone, what kind of projects people are going to be working on. Having a project management system is important, or if you don't necessarily have to have the full project management system, but at least something that can track where your projects are at, what priorities are there, what steps that you need. If you think about like building a house, you can't put the roof on first. You've got to do everything in kind of an order. Going out and building a broadband network, there's a set of steps you have to follow. If you don't follow those steps in order, it gets really difficult. So a project management system will do a good job of helping with that. Vehicle tracking is something that, with all the driving we have to do, it's pretty important to have that so we know where everyone's at. Also helpful for our customer service people to be able to let people know, hey, we've got somebody, they're en route, they should be there in 20 minutes or whatever, to kind of give updates. That's important. And then as much automated reporting as you can get put together. We do a lot with dashboards, and getting that information automated is super helpful. Otherwise, people have to spend a bunch of time trying to put that together. So my last one here is basically on dashboards and KPIs. So your key performance indicators, that's going to show whether you're progressing or whether you're regressing. And you want to come up with the right kind of KPIs. So I'll give you an example of the wrong kind of KPI. We had one where we were going by, there was a closed ticket number for people that were phone techs to close a ticket, and the more tickets you close, the more efficient it looked like the phone tech was being. However, what we found out is we had somebody that would make a phone call, there was no answer, and they would just close the ticket. And so they had this great looking KPI, but it turned out they were ignoring the actual problem. The customer would call back, they would try to call them, no answer, close the ticket again. And so it just turned into this like repeating deal where, okay, after a few months, we figured out that that's not the right kind of KPI. So you want to come up with KPIs that make sense and work. And that also lets you kind of do your planning for, okay, if we want to do X number of installs, where are we going to do that? Do we have enough capacity? So you can plan and then set appropriate goals. It doesn't make sense to say, oh, we want to do a bunch of installs in this area, but we don't actually have enough capacity. So we use tools like the Preseem, for example, to look at an area and say, all right, we've got a bunch of capacity here. We can focus our marketing efforts there. So if we didn't have the KPIs from Preseem, we wouldn't have that information. The other thing is to create dashboards so you can kind of distill your KPIs down into your key values, so you can kind of look at those on like a daily basis and get good information quickly and understand what you're looking at, instead of having to like go through like 20 clicks to find an important piece of information. So we've created, I think we have like 10 or 15 different dashboards that are tailored for each department. So each department has its own set of things that they look at. So really important to have that out there and stay on top of it. And then sometimes you need to develop more advanced tools. So business intelligence, to look at a more complex situation. It's valuable to have that. Sometimes you have to just manually go in and load up an Excel spreadsheet with the information in order to make a decision. But you need to have some tools like that to go in and go through those complex issues and make sure that your KPIs are right and accurate and fulfilling the goals that you want to try and meet. So
you mentioned goal, Matt. So do you find yourself, you've got the set of KPI to actually measure? Do you have a pretty formal process for setting annual goals, quarterly goals, that kind of thing as well?
Yeah, so we follow the traction method. And one of the things that traction says is you need to have a quarterly meeting where you set your rocks. They like to set quarterly rocks because 3 months is a time period where you can, 3 months is a long enough time period you can make some meaningful change. And it's short enough that there is motivation to actually get something done. If you set a year goal, it's important to set an annual goal, but you need to set your quarterly goals to like progress towards that. So, I think we have a meeting every quarter to set our goals for the next quarter. And I think that's what traction suggested. And that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, interesting. Going back to what Abby was saying before as well, that's all part of the system, obviously. All right, well, thank you, Matt. We've got a few minutes left. If anybody from the audience wants to ask a question, please type it in the Q&A, and I'll read them out and ask. And if there's no questions for a minute or two, then we'll call it a day, but we'll give people a chance here to speak up. Abby, anything you want to comment on that Matt talked about? Lots of agreement, I'm assuming, but
Oh, lots of agreement. I think I really appreciate that Matt talked about the power of processes and getting your team in sync, because it's so easy to become a bottlenecked company by one person or by a certain team. And that was something that I tried to approach with TekWav right away, was I will never bottleneck someone. If I am a blocker, tell me and I am removing myself from the situation. Because if you become the last person holding the information, then how are we supposed to grow?
Yeah. All right.
I would say one thing, Abby, I think you really hit on, talking about culture is something that took a really long time, way longer than it should have, for me to understand. And I was really patient with some people I probably shouldn't have been patient with, and tolerated a lot of behavior that I shouldn't have tolerated. And there's this great book that I bought about management, and it was the title of the book is called "What You Accept Is What You Teach." And what's so great about the book is I don't think I've even opened it. I just kept it on my desk. It was like this great reminder. I don't need to read the book. It's right there. If you accept bad behavior, you teach people that bad behavior is acceptable. And that was really a key to help kind of start the process of starting to kind of work some people out. Mm-hmm. And a big part of core values and, your company mission and everything is looking at people's behavior and making sure that it fits into your cultural values. And what happens is when people don't fit into the cultural values, 9 times out of 10, they will select themselves out because there's something that just maybe doesn't quite fit. And they, if they just don't, if people that don't fit tend to look for other places where they'll fit better. And that has been a huge help. It has been incredible. The idea of finding the right seat for the right person. Sometimes the right seat is in somebody else's organization. So you'd be surprised, the last few people that left our organization, I think went into situations that actually worked out better for them, and it worked out better for us.
Yeah.
So big thing is making sure that, that culture, one of our big ones is we're a team and we have each other's backs. And every once in a while you get somebody that starts up a little bit of drama, and it's like, hey, are you, is that appropriate? Or do you have this person's back, or, what have you? And by making sure that it's expressed that we don't tolerate that kind of behavior, it tends to minimize that type of behavior.
No, I agree. And I think one thing to add, and then Gerrit, I know we have a question, is sometimes you also have to look from the leadership standpoint and go, are we creating a toxic culture? Like,
it starts at the top. I was going to say the same thing. Yeah.
You have to, because for example, I noticed there's this one employee who, as soon as he didn't like somebody, like, they were on the chopping block. They were always set for failure. I was noticing too many write-ups being issued and everything. And it was interesting because he learned it from somebody else within leadership. And that person had no idea that behavior was now impacting someone else and creating a toxic working environment. In our case, we had to cut them out. We set them up for success. They can go collect their paycheck from somebody else. And there was this moment of just peace after they were gone. Relief. And the realization of, we can't do that anymore. That's not okay. And we cut it. And that drastically changed our culture to the point that, almost a year later, everybody knows what our culture is, and they will not let us keep up with any sort of toxicity. It's cut off right away if someone's starting to be negative.
Yeah.
Yep.
I feel like we can talk for another hour on this. We probably shouldn't in the interest of time. I'll take the last question, and then we'll probably call it a day here. So the question here is from Vincent. Can you offer virtual consultancy on best practice for success? I guess, Abby, Matt, that's a question for you guys. I don't know if you're open for it or how to contact you, but that's the question.
I would say I'll start off. I'm happy to do any sort of consulting. I threw my email into the chat, so if anyone wants to reach out, they're more than welcome to. I'm also on LinkedIn if that's easier. Feel free to ask any sort of questions, and if more work needs to happen, happy to discuss that.
I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm pretty overloaded for consulting. I try not to unless it's a real special deal. And Abbi, I think, is much better at the business type stuff than I am. So,
and I'll add to, I would say at least reaching out to one of us, if not both of us. We can also connect you with other people that we feel would be helpful, depending on what kind of situation you need help with, or if there's a certain issue that you're trying to resolve. There's a massive network of WISPs and a wealth of people within it who are also equipped to take on new customers as consultants, and we can connect you with those individuals too.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating. Our business at Preseem is a little bit different. Of course, we serve WISP rather than we are a WISP, but we see so many different companies with similar challenges. It's just the stories. Yeah, it's very interesting. But yeah, I think we're out of time. Abbi, Matt, thank you so much. Awesome conversation. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed it, learned a few things, and yeah, let's call it a day. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day, everybody.
Thanks, guys.